Hi, this is Swapnil Bharti, and we are here at the Oracle Open World and Code One Summit, and today we have with us Doug Cutting. You founded Hadoop back in those days, and we talked a lot, but we never got chance to sit face to face and discuss. So it's kind of incredible, to sit here and talk. So, and then the whole Hortonworks and Cloudera merger is also happening. So there is a lot to talk about. But before we go there, tell us, what are you doing here?
I'm here as part of the Groundbreakers program at Oracle. I think they're celebrating some folks who build technologies that work with Java or implemented in Java that sort of were helped mutually, I think, by Java. We've helped to promote the Java platform and benefited from that platform. So we're here to celebrate that a little today and tonight.
So, and what kind of celebration is that?
Oh, we're just giving some talks and chats and interviews and things like this.
And also meet with the other member of the community and interact with them.
Uh-huh.
Right. So let's talk about the whole big data industry. As we are moving in a world where everything is data driven, whether you talk about IoT or cloud, machine learning at the center of that. So tell us about the world that we are moving towards. What role is big data going to play there?
I think we're just starting to see the fruition of this availability of inexpensive hardware and devices and sensors, where organizations are still just beginning to be able to instrument themselves and see more of what they're doing, and then understand that and use that to improve. I mean, it's that simple, and it takes time because it's organizational evolution. Companies are doing business in a certain way, technologies become available, and they don't adopt them, incorporate them overnight. They have to figure out how is this applicable in our particular case. And we're seeing, Cloudera has been in business now for 10 years, and we're really starting to see mainstream companies adopt this in a big way. Just in the last few years, are we really seeing this spread across industries, where folks are now using data far more pervasively in their organizations, no longer just sort of for inventory and payroll and these very narrow things, but for marketing, for manufacturing, for operations, to really understand what's going on. So as a consequence, the technology platforms have changed, and the open source technologies that I was involved with, Hadoop and others, have really been appropriate for these new kinds of applications, where you want to store more data and be able to access it flexibly and explore it and discover value in it. So it's really taking off. It's gratifying to see. We've been anticipating this for a while now, and I think we're really starting to hit our stride now, and especially with the advent of machine learning, we now have a huge new set of techniques to understand data with, understand it better, machine learning and AI methods, and we have the cloud, which makes it much easier to deploy these technologies for organizations that aren't deeply embedded with central IT, to allocate resources, hardware resources, to store data and process it, and experiment, and really, as I said, take advantage of these capabilities.
When we look at all these capabilities and the evolution of Hadoop, and there's a couple of things. First of all, it's helping enterprise customers. At the same time, how is it changing things for data scientists? Because it has gone kind of democratized also a lot of things. Because a lot of machine learning you can do it in cloud now.
Right.
So can you talk about that before we move into enterprise?
Sure. I mean, 10 years ago there weren't data scientists, right? It's a new role that's developed, and I think the democratization really has to do with spreading things throughout institutions. That there are smart people who understand mathematics and statistics throughout organizations, but haven't had access to all of these measurements, to all these data points. And now we're able to give that to them. And so this is the democratization, is that it's no longer a world where you go to the high priests of the data and you pray that someday they might implement the application that you imagine. Rather, folks can directly try to build something themselves, find out how they're misguided, improve it, get it right eventually, and get the value from it. So there's much more rapid iteration, a much more direct, and really seeing that you're taking advantage of all the people in an organization. So I think that's the democratization.
So what has triggered the democratization? Is it the open source nature of it, or evolution of cloud, emergence of cloud, and making
it's a whole lot of things coming together,
yes.
right? I mean, it's the availability of the data, availability of inexpensive hardware, inexpensive software, and all these things sort of come together. And we're seeing this digital transformation of just about every industry is now using digital technologies to understand itself in ways that it didn't. If you look at healthcare and hospitals, they've been, gathering records for a while, but now they can start to grab all the sensor data from all the beds. They can integrate it with data from the pharmacy, from payroll, from the laundry service. All these different things can sort of come together, and they can start to optimize their systems for lower costs and better outcomes. By integrating all these different data sources. So there's just more possibilities for this have just come about because of a number of trends that we've been seeing in the last few years.
Yeah, what are the markets that you are more interested in, or the trends that you're seeing, which interest you or excite you?
I love things in healthcare, which I just mentioned. The little boy inside of me who used to play with trucks loves all the sort of heavy industry things. We're seeing things in mining and trucking and self-driving cars, all that sort of stuff. The area that the adult in me, I think, is most concerned about is that more and more of this data concerns people. It's personal data, and we need to treat it with respect. And we don't have a strong tradition of that, of respecting privacy, running things securely. So I think that there are ethical considerations around applications in this area I'm feeling more and more responsible for as someone who's worked on bringing these technologies to industries. I want to make sure that they don't backfire, that people don't resent them, that people aren't angry with the way that their data is being used. And that rather we can really get the value that I think is out there from these technologies without sacrificing the rights of people. So that's something I'm concerned about, try to speak about and make people aware of, and I'm really gratified. I've been worried about that for a number of years, but I'm in the last year or so seeing a lot more interest in ethical considerations around data applications. And it's now becoming a staple of data science courses, and lots of folks are publishing how they're incorporating that into their processes. So I think we're getting there. We're maturing quickly as an industry.
But if you look at, I don't want to talk about social networks, but data is seen as the new oil. Companies are extracting data, and they are collecting a lot of data because they don't know the value of their data today, but maybe tomorrow it will have, and that totally contrasts from what you are saying, more privacy. So
I think that strategy of collecting it when you're not sure what you're going to use it for is dangerous.
Right.
And I think users have some expectation about the range of uses that someone will make of their data. And I think companies need to be explicit, organizations need to be explicit about what that range of uses are, and not go outside of it. And if they do, be very clear with people. You need to communicate, because people don't want to be surprised and find out that if they gave their location data so that they could do a better job of detecting traffic jams and find that's used to sell them something, people can get rightfully upset.
Right, and then with all those thermostats and smart cameras people are installing at home, it's becoming, privacy is becoming. So what are, you have a vision, but what are you doing to actually have an impact, practical, realistic impact on the world?
It's tricky because I'm not actually building these systems. I'm working for a vendor who's helping folks build them. So what I can do is just try to remind people to think about that.
Education,
education, awareness. Try to help people make sure that they've thought through the ramifications of what they're doing, and that they understand that if they lose the trust of their customers, it will take a long time to regain it. And it takes a long time to earn that trust, and you really don't want to throw it away.
But when you look at more than 1 billion Facebook users, I don't want to name any company, and a lot of people, they still install Wi-Fi camera at home without realizing that whether it's made by a Chinese vendor or what. So sometimes I feel that awareness and education doesn't work because people prefer convenience. So then the third factor comes into is regulations.
I think we need more regulations. I just saw a thing in the news yesterday that Facebook and Google and I've forgotten who else, a number of other large companies are drafting some guidelines for regulations, and that we expect there to be regulations. And I think that's laws are an important part of a civil society, right? We don't want to live in the Wild West and have it a free for all. That really isn't society at all. At some level, things just start to break down, and you get into a medieval state without regulations. So I think we need them. We need guidelines. And we can't trust everyone to enforce things themselves. And I think we'll see that in the U.S. We've got GDPR now in Europe, which was a pretty bold step. I don't necessarily agree with every part of it. Hopefully we'll craft something a little more carefully in the U.S. And it's great to see that a lot of the big companies are engaging in this and accepting that there should be some regulation. And I think that will, in the long run, help industries. If you think about classically, many industries have been regulated. Banking has been regulated, and that helps us trust our banks. The stock markets are tightly regulated, and that helps people be confident that they can put their savings in the stock market, and that it's a relatively level playing field for them. There's the bar organization, which polices attorneys, and we have a lot of regulatory structures in society that are what makes it work. And data systems are doing more and more. So it's time that we have some regulations around that too. I don't think it's something to fear as a bad thing that will reduce the number of opportunities. I think it'll actually increase the amount of business we can do because people will trust things more. They'll understand that there are consequences if their data is abused, and so therefore they should be more willing to give their data. I see people who are very paranoid and don't take advantages of services that they could. Some people won't use the same company for their email as they use for their some other service because they're afraid of any one company having too much information about them, abusing it, and so on. And so they're making their lives harder because they're paranoid. And if you had some regulation about how these different bits of data can be used, then you can take advantage of these sort of synergies between services.
Sometimes it's not paranoia, sometimes also careful. Like I also mix a lot of email addresses for the services I use. So I separate my banking services from what I use to log into Netflix.
Right.
So, but just look at the example of airlines industry. Would you fly in a plane that doesn't meet any regulation?
Exactly.
Or so
yes.
It's your way. Or would you like to watch a football game with no rules?
No rules, exactly. Yes.
So people need to understand that but there is also a kind of campaign against regulations. But we need regulation. We need laws to make our life safe.
I mean, I think our what society is in many ways is agreed upon guidelines of acceptable behavior.
Right.
And without those, we have mayhem. So,
machine learning helps in mitigating threats, fraud. But what are the risks for machine learning itself? Like people sometimes say there could be bias. So what are the risks for that you are concerned about?
I think there's it's very easy to develop things that are bias based upon whatever machine learning implies that you're training it on data. There's some sort of feedback loop, and depending on how you're gathering that data and how you're sampling it and so on, there's going to be bias. There's going to be bias in your algorithms for how you're deploying them, and you need to test for that. You need to constantly be examining and saying, how is this bias manifesting itself? Are these biases ones that we want, that are acceptable, or are they not? How can we prevent them? How can we guard against them? So I think it's just something we need to be aware of. This presumption that an algorithm is somehow less biased than a person is just wrong. Everything has some. An algorithm is a shortcut to the truth.
Right.
It's making a guess, and guesses are going to err in systematic ways. And so you need to understand what are the systematic ways they're going to err, and are those acceptable? It's important, and there's more and more work going on in promoting that sort of diagnostic understanding of bias. An understanding of bias.
So now let's switch the topic and talk about the two companies and the merger that is going to happen. First of all, it's incredible to see two powerhouses coming together. I love you, I love Arun, so it will be nice to see them you guys working together. From the technology perspective, what will be the impact of this merger?
I think we'll have a broader product portfolio. I think the companies have on one hand, 70% of the code we ship is the same, but the 30% that differ, we worked in different areas, and I think Hortonworks has done more in reaching out to the edge for IoT sort of applications, and we've done more at the other end, working on AI and ML support, and so I think they complement each other quite well. I think together we'll be able to provide a more full spectrum set of big data technologies that'll help to solve more customer problems. So,
will you also be merging your GitHub pages?
I think the plan is to have a unified single product from the company. It'll take years.
Yeah. I was talking the source code part because it's the same source, code base.
No, we'll definitely be
the communities,
unified.
They'll be coming together.
Yes.
It will be.
The plan is definitely to have some Unity product offerings over the next couple of years,
right.
And entirely merge our product lines into a single product line.
Right.
Again, if the merger is approved, right? It's not a done deal. We're still at this point operating as separate companies that compete in some cases, and so we need to continue to operate that way. And we're hopeful that the merge will be approved, and that we'll in the future be able to operate as a single company.
Right. Can you talk about what is cloud in Cloudera, or in the world of machine learning?
I mean, initially, I think it was aspirational. The initial concept of the founders of Cloudera, I wasn't there at the founding, was that most people would want to use Hadoop in the cloud. AWS was launched about the same time as the Hadoop project, and so they were two technologies that were born around the same time and had a lot in common. People tended to use Hadoop and similar technologies as a service within organizations. So it seemed like that would be where things went. But it turned out most companies weren't ready to start running things in a public cloud. They wanted to keep them in their own data centers. So that's where the bulk of Cloudera's business stayed for many years. But now, in the last few years, we've seen that people really are willing to run workloads in public clouds. And it provides them with some wonderful capabilities. It really supports this democratization we were talking about earlier. Where organizations can quickly spin up new applications and new workloads, so it's really helpful in that way. I don't think it's going to be what everyone uses for everything. I think we'll continue to have a lot of things running on premises. If there's certain core workloads that run 24/7, or there's legal reasons in many cases why people can't run things in the cloud. But we're excited to see it all go there. I think it's also neat because it helps to delineate the commercial part as a service to help, for example, install and configure and monitor clusters and data sets from the open source, which is the software that you're running, and the stack of tools. a little more clearly. People are happy to pay for these sorts of services that help them to operate things effectively and securely. But the core engines they can continue to consume as open source. So I think it's a nice breakdown that way.
We talked about technology. Let's take a break from technology.
Sure.
So what do you do in your free time for hobby and fun? And no, we will not talk about that. No, I build machine learning models.
I'm a cyclist. And I've got kids, and so I've been doing in the last few years more and more mountain biking. I'm a road biker as well. But mountain biking is just more fun, and it's especially more fun with kids. Kids are a little bit crazy, so I try to get out whenever I can with them. And I've got a group of friends who I try to go out with. We were out this last Wednesday night and rode in the dark with headlights and on a crazy trail, and people were crashing and scraping themselves up. And then at the end we had a sausage roast in the parking lot. It was good fun, but I do a lot of cycling, and it's part of me also is that I'm a gearhead as a technologist, and the gear element of bicycles is something that I enjoy. I work on my own bike to some degree, and I've got a custom-made bike, and so I enjoy that part of it too, the technology there.
Do you ever want self-riding bike?
No. For me, that would be defeat the purpose.
Yeah, but do you also use a lot of IoT devices in your path so that you do know everything is, and a lot of data collection you're doing when you're riding? You go your total natural.
I use Strava, so I record all my rides on GPS, but that's so that I can share them with other people. It's a social network. It's actually my favorite social network. But beyond that, I don't instrument things too much.
Yeah. Then the fun is gone.
And I don't have a screen that I can see while I'm riding. I sort of, I start the recording of the GPS and I put it away and I enjoy where I am while I'm riding. Try to focus on the trail.
Awesome. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
My pleasure.
And of course, once the merger happens and then we'll talk again. And nice seeing you today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the great conversation.